Welcome back, friends, and today I'm going to show you how I make 4 of my most essential bar syrups. We're going to make a Rich Demerara, we're going to make a honey syrup, we're going to make a Grenadine, and an Orgeat. But first, before we get started, if you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you'd like more recipes and tricks to help you mix. Now, let's go make some bar syrup. Okay, the first syrup that we're going to make today is a Rich Demerara syrup. And the reason why we call it a rich syrup is actually because it has more sugar than a simple syrup. Rich syrups have 2 parts sugar to 1 part whatever it is you're dissolving it in. And a simple syrup will be 1 to 1. And there's even a term for right in between, which is called a semi-rich syrup, which is 1.5 to 1. A Demerara is a sugar that hasn't had the molasses completely stripped off of it. So it has a little bit of a golden color. You can see the difference between a refined white sugar and a Demerara. It looks a little bit like brown sugar, but it's not brown sugar. Brown sugar is actually refined sugar that has had molasses put back into it. I find that it's got beautiful toffee and caramel notes that play perfectly with certain spirits like whiskey and rum. So to make a Rich Demerara syrup, start by adding 1 cup of water to a saucepan. I like to warm the water a little before adding the sugar. Once the water started to warm, we'll add our Demerara. And remember, this is a rich syrup, so we're going to add 2 cups of sugar to the 1 cup of water. And then just simply stir. You don't want to bring this to a big boil. You don't want to heat it too long. You'll break down the sugars and it will thin the syrup, which sort of defeats the purpose of making a rich syrup in the first place. And once there are no more crystals in there and it's completely dissolved, just remove it from the heat and your Rich Demerara is done. Now on to the next, we're gonna make some honey syrup. I love using honey in cocktails. The problem is you can't just use straight honey in a drink. The cocktail will be icy cold, the honey turns into a clumpy mess, it just won't dissolve, you can't do it. And so the solution is to make a honey syrup, which is super easy to make. Now honey can be a little tricky as a sweetener, even when making a syrup, because not all honeys are exactly the same. Some have kind of a heavier funk to them, like buckwheat honey, while others can be lighter and brighter, like a clover honey. So my rule of thumb is to always start with a 1-to-1 ratio, honey to water. So to make this honey syrup, we're going to begin with 1 cup of water. And once that water has started to heat up, we're going to add in 1 cup of honey. If it's warm enough, it will already start to sort of dissolve a little bit. Just let it continue to heat and stir, and it will magically turn from honey into honey syrup before your eyes. Take it off the heat, and that is your honey syrup. And on to syrup number 3, we're going to make some Grenadine. Now, when most people think of Grenadine, they think of the stuff that comes in the plastic bottle, and it's this bright red, super sweet thing, or it's what the cherries sit in that are those maraschino cherries. It adds a nice bright red color, but the flavor is it just tastes like pure sugar to me. And actually, Grenadine doesn't really have any cherry flavoring at all. It's made with pomegranate. But that doesn't mean that you can't use the red stuff. It's just not what I like to use in cocktails. So this is how you make Grenadine, which I think is preferable. Now the first ingredient is going to be pomegranate juice. Make sure you buy a no sugar added pomegranate juice. We're going to be putting plenty of sugar in this. We want to keep the tart aspect of the pomegranate. And we'll add 1 cup to a saucepan. And then we'll add our sugar. Now we're making a semi-rich syrup. We're going to add 1.5 cups of sugar. Now the next ingredient I use after the sugar is pomegranate molasses. Pomegranate molasses is a very concentrated form of the pomegranate juice. It's just going to add that extra depth of flavor. It has a sweet tartness that I think really adds a punch to this Grenadine. And we'll just add 1 teaspoon of the pomegranate molasses. Now that the sugar and the molasses are in there, we're just going to stir over medium heat. Once all of the sugar granules are dissolved, turn the heat off, let it cool a little bit, and once it's cooled, we're going to add our last ingredient, which is 1/4 teaspoon, a tiny amount, of orange flower water. And once you have the orange flower water in, that is your Grenadine. Now it's not gonna have that bright electric red look, but it is gonna taste a lot better. And finally, our last syrup, it's time to make some Orgeat. Now Orgeat is a sweet almond syrup. There are lots of different brands to choose from and they range in quality, but I find that this recipe works perfectly. In fact, I used it in my recent Mai Tai video, if you want to check that out. Now, one of the issues with Orgeat is that it is kind of difficult to make if you make it traditionally. Most recipes require that you use slivered blanched almonds and then you squeeze out the milk from that. But I find that to be way too time consuming and you don't get a very consistent product when you're finished. So rather than messing around with all those almonds, I use almond milk. Now make sure that the almond milk that you use has no sugar added. So to make your homemade Orgeat, start with 1 cup of the unsweetened almond milk and add it to a saucepan. Turn your heat up to medium, and we're going to add 1.5 cups of sugar. Then stir the sugar in the almond milk over the heat until the granules dissolve and you have a syrup-like consistency. Once the sugar's dissolved, turn the heat off and let it cool a little. Once it's cooled some, we're going to add 1 teaspoon of our orange blossom water. I think the orange and the almond really go good together. And then we're gonna add 1/4 teaspoon of almond extract. This is gonna add just a little extra almond punch. A little goes a long way. Give it one little quick last stir. And that is Orgeat. And there you have it. These are the syrups we made today. I have a Rich Demerara, a honey syrup, Grenadine, and Orgeat. And I'm kind of excited about the drinks that I'm gonna make with these. One thing that I did want to mention is these will last about a month to a month and a half in the fridge. If you want to extend the life on them, just add 1/2 ounce of vodka to each one of those recipes. I will probably be linking this episode to other episodes that use these syrups so people can find the recipes easily. I hope that you were able to give these recipes a shot at home. And I hope you enjoyed what you saw today. I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters. I couldn't do this without your help. And until next time, cheers.